Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, let me just do a quick sound check. Greg, I know you're online with us tonight doing a sound check. Can you hear us? Are we
Yes, I
unmuted?
can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Greg.
Okay,
You bet.
great. With that, let's get started on tonight's meeting. It's going to be a city council meeting of the city of Lake Stevens. It's February 27th, 2024. We're live down in the mill and we are also doing this on Zoom and we will later publish it on our YouTube channel. With that, I would ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, great. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Daughtry,
Present.
Councilmember Peters
Present.
Hagan,
Present.
Councilmember Donahue,
Present.
Councilmember Shipman,
Present.
Councilmember Jorstad,
Present.
Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
Councilmember Tagent.
Present.
Okay, great. Council President, can we get an agenda with, we're gonna need to strike 5A.
Any other questions, concerns, additions, deletions?
Move to approve the agenda
Second. With the
with 5A.
omission of 5A. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You have an agenda.
Excellent, perfect. Our next item, is Tina gonna be here, Lindsay?
I see her
So-
online. She's online.
She's on? She won't be.
Oh, okay.
So we get you two. I get Lindsay. Well, we will take Lindsay. Lindsay, you have the floor.
I'm going to share your presentation here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello. Okay. It's working.
We get on hearing her.
Working okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Great.
And then you'll just tell me next slide.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Council members and Mayor Gailey, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to speak with you all, update you on what's been happening at the Lake Stevens Community Resource Center, what's kind of coming down the pike for 2024 and an ask for you at the end. So next slide, Kelly. All right, so just a few quick slides on what VOA, or Volunteers of America Western Washington, does, and a recap of what our Lake Stevens Community Resource Center does. So first at VOA, we really empower people and strengthen communities in need. We really live true to that mission and our vision to build healthy, stable communities where all people live and thrive is really something that we really strive for. And you can see through our CRCs. So we have 8 different areas of service, if you can believe it or not. Volunteers of America is an active and growing agency. So first and foremost, as our community resource centers here in Lake Stevens, Arlington, and out in Sultan to service the Sky Valley community. Then our hunger prevention department, disability services, behavioral health, dispute resolution centers here in Snohomish County and up in Skagit County. We have early childhood education assistance programs, or ECAPS. We have 3 of those sites. Senior services, housing, and I look like I got community resource centers on there twice. You know, I love it that much. So we do a lot. And right now we're at over 100 or 800 employees across Western Washington. Next slide. So what our community resource centers do, really we're one-stop shops. So you can think of us like that. We're really a place where families and individuals in need can come and access resources to meet their basic needs, right? To get to a more stable life for themselves. So we provide just a wide range of supports, from emergency services like food, diapers, hygiene needs to case management. We're really great at that. We're really good at helping folks when they're in their crisis. So whether that's helping with a utility bill, you know, helping to keep the lights on, to helping maybe with a rent payment, to getting their job resume fixed so they can go after that next job. And we do help with all sorts of other types of assistance like rental and utilities applications, DSHS, healthcare, kind of you name it. If we can't do it in-house, we make sure that we are a key place where other referrals and resources can also be accessed. So we have just a wide network of other service partners. All right, so a recap of just what we've been doing since we opened in January 2021. It's been a great ride to where we are today. Really, we started at the Lake Church, downtown Lake Stevens, or at the other end of Lake Stevens, and then moved to Holy Cross Church in 2022. And we are in a great location. If you haven't seen us yet, I really invite you to come to our new space where we're co-located with the newly built Lake Stevens Community Food Bank. It's a beautiful facility and really a great place where people can go and access services without the stigma too. So it's a wonderful place to be. And really, we really fulfill that mission of VOA of offering a safe place to seek help, right, without that stigma again, and to make it easy to access resources during your time of need. So a quick update on our numbers. We really grew from 1 staff, which is your site director, Tina Mandela at the Lake Stevens Community Resource Center, to now we have 6 staff. And that's really just speaks to what we've been able to do to further meet the needs here in the community. So we served over 3,000 individuals in 2021, right? That was really height of pandemic time. So we had a lot of families and individuals who had never accessed social services before, but were in need of a lot of rental assistance. So that's what that big number really reflects is that pandemic assistance funding. Then we've been remaining fairly consistent. So really that says the need's still there, and we're still seeing new families, new individuals come to us needing services. Next. All right, so we do more than just be that one-stop place, right? We're actually, as a community resource center, really engaged in the community. So we like to be out and about, getting our services out there, and helping build both family and youth development. So you'll see on here just some examples like our Mother's Day card frenzy, where we provide cards, handprints, just seed packets and a flower. So just a free event for kiddos and their families to come and do just a special thing for mom. To our back to school celebration, we have a couple more photos further in the presentation that shows just our impact this past year. Creative Kiddos is a great event where we bring, excuse me, sensory activities for neurodiverse kiddos and their families. So just a really fun place and really builds that inclusive community for everyone. Our birthday program is a really neat thing that we offer year round. So for folks that we help, we make sure that we take note of their kiddo's birthday. And so every year we'll give them a call and say, hey, do you want to come down and pick out a birthday gift with some wrappy paper and maybe some cake mix to really make sure that day is really special. So that's a wonderful program Tina's created. And then our toy drive. So I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Next one. All right, so like I said, back to school, and you might see someone you know in some of these photos that are
He's camouflaged though.
a little bit.
Those legs are glaring, so.
Was manning the grill pretty hard that day. Served on that one day in August at our back to school celebration over at Mid-Cav School. We served almost 200 youth and their families with both a drive-through and an in-service resource fair. So not only were they able to get backpack school supplies, they had access to almost 20 different service providers, including some photos. And so it was just a really great day. That also included some great food grilled up by Mayor Gailey. So next.
Really like that picture of the mayor.
And the next is our holiday toy drive. That has been just another booming success that will likely grow in this next year. We served 337 children in 2023. And that was really, we think, related to our merge with the food bank and really just growing that access for kids and their families. And so just a really great collaboration as well with the police department and fire department that Tina creates, as well as bringing in the explorers to have extra volunteer service, and just a really great volunteer opportunity as well. And then, like I talked about, Creative Kiddos and our Mother's Day events, just two other programs that we like to do that are free events where you can just, have that opportunity to build family and youth development. And then this just talks about our vast partners. Really, it takes a village to get to do what we do. There's no magical funding source that just helps us plop a community resource center and get to serve the thousands of people that we do every year. And so from the city of Lake Stevens to multiple businesses and Rotary to the food bank, of course, and the Lions Club, and just growing. And so I like to put that in there because it just goes to show Tina's always out, our site director, always out to look for more partners to help us achieve our mission, because we cannot do it alone. It truly takes a village to get to do what we do. Next. All right, so at the Resource Center, we're really seeing a growing number of families reach out to us, like I said. So there's still new folks that have never had to utilize social services before, that are suddenly living paycheck to paycheck. They just either can't recover from COVID or something has happened, and maybe they're just priced out of housing or just rising cost of living. And it's just tough to get by for so many families and individuals right now. So one stat that I like to put out there, and really our Resource Center sees this and probably a little bit more, is our return on investment. So for every dollar spent on a community resource center like ours, there's a savings of almost $5. That's put back into the community in terms of just economic stability. And I would say with our operations, it's probably a little bit more than that. But that really tells to just what it takes for a one-stop shop and a body that really helps to collaborate with everyone else that's trying to do the same thing, and the impact that would have. So last year, y'all supported us with an amazing gift of $50,000 that went, and I would say we were able to leverage to growing from like 3 staff to 6. And as I hope I showed you tonight, the need we're seeing is just consistent. It's not slowing down anytime soon. We hope to develop our support services, our case management to help meet the need. Right now, I have a case manager with a large caseload. And so that support's needed. We have a beautiful building that we get to really be in, but there's so many more services we want to provide, right? So we want to get out in the community. We don't want to assume that people know where we're at. And so that takes extra efforts too. So really, I'm humbly coming to you all asking for $65,000 to help support our operations into 2024, because I know we're able to make that impact that you'll be able to see in your community. Just like we did last year, we're going to continue to do what we're doing. And so happy to answer any questions. But it does, like I said, take a village, and we're doing just great work and hope with your support to do even more.
I've got a question. Is the families that you are supporting and helping, is there a lot of new, or is it the same families? What is the percentage of people you continually help versus newer people? Yeah, so I'd say, and I can get back to you on the specifics, but when we looked at data last year, it was roughly 30% were newer families. Newer families are individuals coming to us. And so that is pretty large, with an influx of 30% in new cases. So 70% would be the same people you're helping continuously. Yeah, and that's not like the same problem. It could be working with folks coming in, for a periodic emergency food bag, maybe help with a gas voucher, working on their resume. So they're coming in a couple times. So it could look a lot of different ways. Yeah, good question.
I just had a question. How is it looking thus far in 2024? I know we're not that far into the calendar year, but how is it looking, say, from this school year, from fall forward this year? How are the needs looking? Are they looking about steady? Are they looking more? How's that looking?
So I can answer that in a few different ways. So I can say from terms of our case management, We just got a new contract for a navigator that works with literally homeless individuals and families. And so we wouldn't have gotten that contract if there wasn't a need. And so now we have an individual that has a caseload of literally homeless families and individuals on our team. In addition to what I was saying with the support specialist who has just a packed caseload every week, consistent. So ideally, I'd love to get those folks in sooner. Folks sometimes just with the staff I've had, it might take a few days and some needs are more urgent than that. Upwards of even a week sometimes before we get really booked. We have a teen parent program that's really grown over the last year as well, that we got great funding from United Healthcare to get it off the ground. And so we're still seeing new teen and young adult parents come in need of resources. So that's an emerging need. That's unfortunate, but at least we're there to help them. So those are kind of two ways that I'm seeing. I think there's also more need for more free and free events for families to attend, that helps nurture that develop between them and their child as well. And so that's another need that Tina, our site director is just getting input from the community. Hey, we're seeing this is emerging as a gap. So we're constantly listening. I hope there was one need out there. But those are just a few.
Mayor Tina Mandela would like to say something. I just brought her in.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, Tina, go ahead.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, council members. My apologies for not being there. It's true, COVID is still around. I'm living proof. But I did hear a question about our growth. Everyone on the council and mayor, you receive our monthly reports, our monthly impact reports. January of 2024 compared to January of 2023, I think those numbers are pretty impactful. January of 2023, we saw 33 families in the city of Lake Stevens for a total of 99 people served. January of 2024, it literally to the number tripled. We saw 99 families for a total of 300 people. That just shows you the growth, and it's going to continue to grow. I will continue sending these numbers to you monthly, but that in itself, to me, was shocking. It's just showing what is going on in our community. As Lindsay stated, we were gifted I'm just a little under the weather, our housing navigator. She started with us, Miss Delia Boyzo, 3 months ago, and we've already housed 3 people in our community. There is someone in our community who is living in homelessness that I see tattered all the time on our social media boards. We brought her in. We've taken care of her. She's done what she's needed to do, and she's no longer sleeping at our bus stop there by Target. It's everyday people like you and I that need to commit to serve the people in our community who need us the most. And I thank you for what you guys have done for us in this past year. And I look forward to what to continue to grow in the next year. And so with that ask that Lindsay gave, the promise that we can give to you, every penny of that's going into our community to make it a better and safer place for our youth and the people who need it now. Thank you.
For those new council members, Tina is the total gem that we are blessed with in this city. Who's the operations in the CRC at the food bank. If you haven't met her, you need to go meet her. She's truly a great human being. And she gives you, if you haven't seen them yet, we forward a report that she does every month to you to let you know the numbers and what's going on. So that's who Tina is for the new members who may not know her.
So I do have a question, which I would concur with the mayor. I mean, if we can clone her and somehow have more of her, hire new hires. I mean, she is amazing. Just one of the best people I've ever seen work in that capacity. I mean, she's just an extraordinary person who does good work. So I have a question about the highlight in your monthly reports. You highlight an individual or family and how you're able to assist them. How common are those stories? I mean, if she had 99 people this last month, I mean, I don't know how you go about selecting that, but those stories are really paint a very clear picture.
Good.
So how do you guys go about selecting who to highlight?
Yeah, so really to make it plain, I have a standing appointment with our support specialist or new navigator and say, give me some stories. And I say, is there anyone that you would like to highlight in particular, that moved you? And so I work with our frontline staff and those families and clients to get those stories.
I really appreciate those. Thank you. I appreciate the monthly reports and it shows, housing, gas, utilities, food, all the different areas and the number of people that are helped. So for me, it helps see the good work that's being done, the types of services that are being offered. So please continue sending those out because those are really helpful for me to see.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Lindsay, thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for the presentation and the information. I do have a question. If the city were to come back and say, sorry, we're not able to financially support you in 2024, what would that mean for your program?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So we definitely wouldn't stop. We'd have to make some cutbacks. We just would have to kind of readdress where we could go in 2024 in terms of events. If we're able to explore hiring on another support specialist or case manager. So we'd have to just take a look at our growth, I'd say.
Thank you.
So to follow up on that, what is your budget for this operation for
Our budget-
2024?
Yeah, so I can, I'm gonna look at my chief operating officer. I want to quote accurately. Thank you. Thank you. So our budget is approximately 450,000 per year.
Just for Lake Stevens?
Yes, just for the Lake Stevens Community Resource Center.
So this ask that you're presenting is pretty substantial part of that.
Yeah, it could be looked at like that. We are still in our really fourth year of growth. So we're still making those connections with philanthropic funders, with other growth and contracts with Snohomish County. So really this will help us continue to grow, just with kind of any entity. And so one thing that we have coming up, for instance, is our Home is Where the Heart Is campaign. So we're actively working on diversifying our development streams too.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Lindsay? Well, if you haven't been down there, go down to see Tina. Go in the food bank, go upstairs. Tina's back there. Big smile. And go see what they've got going on. It's good stuff.
Can I ask that we add this topic to our our next available workshop slot that we have available? Just for further discussion?
We had a little brief discussion. We were going to hopefully get some numbers from our budget expert, who's not here tonight,
Right.
Here tonight.
Yeah, I noticed that.
and kind of see where things fit
Great.
and
I'd
kind of
I'd
proceed
support
down that
as
path.
well. I'd like
Yeah.
to have the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can have Barb look at some numbers and maybe add that in our latest amendment. But
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you
Lindsay,
so
thank you so much
Thanks,
for being here.
Thank
Good
you.
seeing you.
Have a good night.
You can donate a card.
Simple.
Lindsay, one of our citizen community members who frequents Costco.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? Great. And Tina, thank you. Hope you feel better.
Thanks, Tina.
All right, let's move forward to Lake Stevens Water Quality Review. Where are you at, Shannon?
Three minutes.
3 minutes. All right, we're gonna get this done really quickly.
Yeah, I saw how much.
Buckle up.
Whoa.
Don't worry, it won't take as long. We did pare it down a little.
It's okay. I like hearing somebody that knows what they're doing.
Well, that's a perfect introduction because I'm Shannon Front. I'm the surface water manager for the city of Lake Stevens. And tonight I'd like to present Marissa. She works with Snohomish County and the lake management team, and she's going to give the presentation tonight. So you're in luck.
Well, that didn't go the way I thought.
Thank you, Shannon, and thanks for inviting me to talk tonight. So for those of you that may not be aware, the city of Lake Stevens contracts with Snohomish County to do the water quality monitoring for the city. So that is why I'm here. We monitor the city, the Lake Stevens for the city, as well as about 35 other lakes throughout Snohomish County. So in the interest of time, I've heard that we are trying to kind of keep it streamlined and cut things down. So Shannon suggested we maybe hold questions to the end so we can hear everything and then, your questions might be answered as we go. So, okay. So we're going to just kind of briefly touch on the history of the lake health and lake management strategies, where we currently are at, our next steps, and then also actions that community members can take to protect the lake. So the question is, well, how do we go about assessing lake health? And there are lots of ways you can look at it, but in the county, what we've landed on, there's 4 basic things that you can look at. One is water clarity. It's kind of how far into the water you can see, which, it's a pretty simple one. The other is phosphorus. Phosphorus is a nutrient that drives algae production and aquatic plant production. We'll talk a lot about phosphorus tonight. It's really the key to the lake health at Lake Stevens. And then there's algae, or the life in the lake, and then the shoreline health of the lake. So these are the 4 parameters. We'll get more into those as we go. And then how do we rate health? And so we've come up with 4 health rating categories: excellent, good, fair, and poor. And lakes vary naturally. So excellent, good, fair can all be natural ratings for many lakes. Stevens, because it's enormous and deep, is going to tend to be naturally on that excellent range, whereas a smaller, tiny lake that's very shallow might be more naturally on the fair. So we don't really get worried unless we see health ratings in the poor condition. This means that there's probably some sort of human activity that's causing conditions to be degraded or poor. We also get worried if we see lakes changing fast between these categories. So lakes age very slowly. So we would expect a change from, excellent to good in 100 years. But if we start seeing that in 10, 20 years, there's something else going on that we need to be worried. So those are kind of the 2 red flags we look out for. So if we could summarize this presentation into one slide, currently Lake Stevens is in excellent health, but it's taken us a lot of work to get there. And when I say us, I mean you all in the city, and for a number of years before you annexed it all, the county, we've been working together for a long time on this. And so I'm just going to run through kind of where we were and how we got here. So I did not live here in the 70s and 80s, but I imagine many of you here might have. And apparently the water quality conditions were not so great in the 70s and 80s. There was very frequent algae blooms. Maybe it looks like this green scum on the surface, as well as just kind of other ongoing water quality problems. And algae blooms in particularly, we get worried because they can produce toxins. So I won't get into a lot of these. There's liver and nerve toxins. But overall, lakes can be unsafe if these blooms are there. They don't always produce toxins, but if you see any sort of green algae scum, the message is when in doubt, stay out, because toxins can affect human and pet health. These are just a few of the symptoms. These are the warning signs that the state has produced. And if you have any symptoms, you should definitely seek medical help for you or your pet. That being said, this has been a small problem at Lake Stevens in recent years. So it's not very common compared to a lot of other lakes in our region. So what causes algae blooms? So just like if you were wanting to grow healthy plants in your garden, you're going to want to add nutrients to it. And in lakes, phosphorus is the key nutrient. This is a famous lake study where they put a big curtain and they put a bunch of nitrogen on one side and a bunch of phosphorus on the other side. and the bottom is the phosphorus, and it basically made pea soup. So it doesn't take very much. 1 teaspoon of phosphorus grows 30 pounds of algae, they estimate. So it's very tiny amounts. When we measure phosphorus in the lake, we measure it in parts per billion. So really, really tiny amounts. So where does it come from though? And phosphorus basically comes from around the lake, or what's known as the watershed. So for Lake Stevens, your watershed is everything here in this yellow line. So if a drop of water lands within that yellow line, it's going to end up in the lake, whether it goes through a stream or a ditch or a pipe, it'll flow into the lake. Outside, it's going somewhere else. So, and rain comes from, so when it rains, the runoff picks up things along the land, and carries it into the lake. And so all these, sources that come from around the lake are called external loading. So the common ones happen really when people come to the watershed. So you can get phosphorus from bare and eroding soils. Our soils are very rich in phosphorus in this area. You can also get it from septic systems. I know that most of the city is on sewers, but there are still some septic systems out in the watershed. You can get it from pet and animal waste. So dogs, cats, we love our dogs, especially horses, chickens, other things, anything to do with manure. And we can also get it from roads and driveways. So just like, as I said, our dirt is rich in phosphorus. So anytime you have soil or sediment or other things, that washes off those hard surfaces and into ditches and streams and can get into the lake that way, along with other pollutants like oils and that sort of thing. And you can get it from fertilizer. The good news is the state passed a fertilizer ban in 2013. So our turf lawn fertilizers no longer have phosphorus in them. But you can buy pasture feed that has phosphorus in it, as well as, you know, your typical garden fertilizers for your flowers and vegetable beds. So the other source of phosphorus is that over time, lakes are basically a giant bowl. So all of that phosphorus washes in, gets to the lake bottom, and it can get recycled back into the lake each year. And that's called internal loading. And I'll tell you more about how that works later. So those are the main sources of phosphorus that come into the lake. So back in the 80s, there was a study done to understand what those main sources of phosphorus were so that we could figure out a plan. And what they found is that runoff, so all that other sources I was kind of talking about, like the pet waste and the septics, actually was a very small amount. I take that back, just like the pet waste and the fertilizers. Groundwater, there can be some natural groundwater, but this is probably more from those septic systems. That shallow groundwater was contributing some, but not very much. Interestingly enough, they found that waterfowl was a huge contributor. And I don't know if anybody lived on the lake at the time then, but there used to be a landfill nearby that was active, and that landfill attracted seagulls. And apparently thousands of gulls would come to the lake each night after feeding at the landfill. And their waste was a huge proportion of the phosphorus coming into the lake. Luckily, that landfill has since been capped, and so the gulls have gone away. So we do get our coots and other things, but a much more natural, normal level of waterfowl. But the big source was internal loading. So like I mentioned, it can get recycled to the lake back each year. And so that was accounting for 52% of the lake phosphorus. And you'll note that the load was quite high. It's 2,155 kilograms. So it's a huge lake, but it was enough to cause problems. So in order to understand what we decided to do about it, I'm going to have to give you just a little lake ecology brief. Lakes are very seasonal in terms of temperature. If you went out there right now, the lake would be the same cold temperature all throughout the lake. But as the summer comes, the surface gets warmed up and gets warmer and warmer until it eventually becomes like 2 layers of a cake, where the top is warm and the water becomes less dense. So the bottom water is cold and dense. The upper water is warm, and they no longer mix. So you don't get any temperature difference. So if you've ever been in a smaller lake, maybe in your feet are really cold spot, could be a spring, but it might be that you're just feeling the difference in the lake layers. And then in the fall, that turns over, it gets closer and closer. And then you get a good wind event and it mixes. So Lake Stevens, it's so big, this doesn't actually happen until late December, early January usually. So why is that important? Well, this affects the oxygen in the lake. So similarly, if you went out there, the whole lake has oxygen. So the fish are happy everywhere because there's plenty of oxygen. But in the summer, because there's two layers of a cake, oops, my animations are going without me. Because there's two layers of a cake, your, see if I can get rid of that, your bacteria and stuff in the bottom of the lake eat up all that oxygen, but it can no longer get oxygen from the atmosphere. So in the summer, there becomes devoid of oxygen. So if you're a fisherman, that's why you might not find as many fish deeper down in the lake, because there's not enough oxygen for them. But in the fall, that mixes and cools over. But the biggest thing here is there is a chemical reaction that occurs in the summer where phosphorus, it can bind to lots of things in the soil, but if it binds to iron, when there's lots of oxygen, it comes released when that oxygen goes away. So you need iron to keep that oxygen bound, or to keep the phosphorus bound, or you need to keep oxygen there. So what did we do? We decided that we're going to try and keep the lake oxygenated in the bottom, because that way we won't have that iron releasing phosphorus. So for those of you that have been out on the lake in the past, you might have seen the bubbles coming up at the surface. This was the world's largest aeration system that was installed at the time. It was in 1994. It was really on the cutting edge of lake science. It's a pretty new, area of research. And this was a big deal then. It was a pretty amazing kind of experiment. And the way it worked, it would bring air from the surface and then it would pull the low oxygen from the lake bottom, it'd mix it with air and then bring it back down. So it was highly oxygenated. So it didn't disrupt that cake layer. It just brought oxygen right to the bottom of the lake. And we didn't have to worry then if there was enough iron there, it would hold that phosphorus and we would stop that internal sediment cycling. So it worked really well to start. It provided significant benefits to the lake, helped to keep that oxygen levels low, and it was also great for fish habitat. We love this. Unfortunately, it stopped working. This is around when I started in the early 2010s or so. We started to see algae blooms reemerging. So we had a couple postings and toxin levels, this microcystin toxin that's in the middle there, when those red values are above the recreational standard, that can be harmful to humans and pets. And so there was definitely some concerns. And this happened typically in the wintertime because of that lake mixing. So there was a lot of concern of why isn't this working? And so we had commissioned a study to figure out what's going on. And what we found is we did a study of the sediments, is that we actually didn't have enough iron. So like I mentioned, you had to have iron to bind that phosphorus. And so even though there was oxygen in the bottom, we just basically ran out of iron in the lake sediments to work. So if we had all the information and scientific knowledge that we had today, we probably wouldn't have installed the aeration system, because we now know you need a lot more iron than Lake Stevens has. But we didn't know that at the time. Good news is there are some other options. Why else did it stop working is that the external loading has increased a lot since that past study. So while this overall pie of how much phosphorus is coming into the lake got reduced by half, our runoff proportion significantly increased. So things like the pet waste, the lawn fertilizers, that sort of thing also increased. So the second option, and this is probably the most common lake restoration technique in the world, is to treat with alum. So another thing that phosphorus combined with is aluminum. And the great thing about this is it is a permanent bond. It doesn't matter how much oxygen is in the water. So you basically add a lot of alum to your water, or aluminum in the form of alum. And if you've gone to the grocery store and you're a pickler type person, you might have bought alum there, or it's also used in drinking water treatment as a clarifier to clear the water cloud sediment from the water. So it's expensive to apply that much aluminum to a lake as large as Lake Stevens. And so basically what at the time the city decided is that we would take the money that we were using to maintain the aerator and instead apply that each year to apply alum, which was about $100,000 at the time. And so the idea is about 9 to 12 years, we could bind all of that phosphorus in the lake sediments. And the first treatment was in 2013. So now fast forward to 2022, we did a study, examine the efficacy of alum and how we were doing. Well, it was actually in 2021, but we published it in 2022. So overall, it was working great. The health of the lake is excellent. This health report is available on the website. We will be updating it with 2024 health data along with all of our lakes very soon. 2023 health report. This is it. And so on that health report, we look at each of these things that we talk about for lake health. So you can see, let me just orient you on each of these graphs. The blue dots represent the summer average of that parameter. So in here, it's the summer average of all of our water clarity readings. And this one's a little different than the rest. You want a deeper SECI or bigger SECI depth is a better health because that means you can see further down into the water. So interestingly, before aeration, we actually were already in an excellent health range, but we were right on the border of good. Aeration did help that some, especially in the middle years. But then as we got alum, our water quality, our clarity has significantly increased to about 12 feet or meters down. So it's quite far down that you can see.
You said is it 12 meters now?
Yes, wait, that should be feet though,
I
I'm
think
pretty sure.
25.9
Sorry.
Or I just looked.
Sorry, that's labeled wrong. I apologize for that. We convert over to feet for people that are not as used to thinking about meters, but I didn't change the axis. Sorry about that. I'm like, that doesn't seem quite right. But that's one of the deepest. There's only one lake that has higher water clarity in the county. It's Lake High if you're interested.
Lake Ty?
Lake High up in Stanwood. Anyway, 7 Lakes area. Sorry. 2, sorry, trying to stay focused. Okay.
Where's that at? Lake Cows?
Lake High. It's by Lake Goodwin and Shoecraft up.
Small lake.
Yeah.
I thought you said Lake Ty and I'm
Oh,
like,
oh no,
like-
not Lake Time. No, that's a
We're
detention
gonna
fund.
be in competition here.
Sorry. Okay. Phosphorus. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of data before the aerator was started. There was kind of a mix of volunteers and other things. And so, but you can see that phosphorus was starting to increase with aeration and not working as well. And there's 2 different depths we look at phosphorus. The top of the lake, about 1 meter, is what we look at as kind of current pollution coming in. And the bottom of the lake is what we look at for how much is coming from the lake bottom. So this is a better metric of how much is coming in from the lake surface or from, the runoff and other things. And we did see some excellent, though there were a couple very high readings back around 2005, 2006. But again, since the alum treatment is gone, the phosphorus is completely been in the excellent range and has been doing very well. The most exciting part, though, here is the phosphorus at the lake bottom, because this was really the goal of all the lake restoration. And we had some very high years right before the aeration started. The aeration really took it out to start. It took a couple of years to get there, but you can see that decreasing efficacy. But since alum, we've nearly eliminated the internal loading from the lake bottom. So it's really met our goals in terms of the phosphorus control. And then lastly is algae. This is what the phosphorus feeds that can be the problem. And similarly, aeration started off working really well to reduce the algae, but in the last years of its life, it had significantly been reduced. So the chlorophyll was much higher. This is chlorophyll, by the way, which is found in algae. And since the alum, we've had really excellent control. This is again in the summer is one thing I do want to point out. So, we also look at other parts of the lake food chain. I think I'm going to cut most of this out just for speed, but there are other things called zooplankton that feed on the algae. That's also very important for our fish and fish health. There was some concerns that alum might be affecting this. Overall, we did find that there is a greater diversity of that zooplankton since the alum, and more species that the fish like to eat since the alum treatments have started. So I'm going to skip these. But there are some problems. First of all, pollution is still coming in during the rainy season. You have a very highly developed lake watershed with lots of homes and increasing growth, as you all know. And so with more people comes new phosphorus. And it's hard to quantify because we don't have a lot of stream data. This is not something the city's collected in the past to be able to quantify exactly how much is coming in. The other thing, I'm not going to go a whole lot into this, but basically, even though the summer phosphorus levels and chlorophyll blooms or algae blooms have come down, we're still getting very high winter levels. So because it rains in the winter, we are getting high loading in those winter months. And you can see the little peaks that are happening in algae are happening during those winter months. And so even though we've got a lot of that internal phosphorus controlled, we still have a bunch more coming in. So, and along with that, in January 2023, we had our first bloom in a very long time. The city does manage the monitoring of those blooms. They follow the procedures from the Department of Health, notifying the public and doing signs. So the good thing about this is at least the winter is a much lower recreational time. So the impacts are lower, but residents do need to be aware not to let their dogs drink the water in particular. Okay, and then our last parameter is shoreline health. We did original surveys in 2009 to understand shoreline health. We haven't talked much about shoreline health, but a natural shoreline would have lots of plants along the shoreline that provide habitat for turtles, waterfowl, wildlife, that sort of thing. But those deeply rooted plants also are kind of a last line of defense as they filter out pollution versus turf grass has really shallow roots. So you get about 9 or 10 times more filtering quality from those deeply rooted plants. So we looked on these shoreline surveys. We basically boated around the entire lake back in 2008 and 9, when a good chunk of it was still within the county. And we tracked how much of the lake had armoring, like bulkheads, rock revetments, beach or sand fill, because when you put those hardening things in, it kind of reduces the habitat at that lake interface. And then we also assessed how much shoreline vegetation was intact. So this data will be available on the website very soon. We just processed this. This is back in 2009, though. The Lake Stevens, as you know, if you've driven around, has very poor shoreline health. It's the worst in the county. It's because it's so developed, and much of it was developed in the past before we knew really all these good things for lake health. So it is the one thing that the lake has really poor shoreline health, unfortunately. So we'll talk a little bit about what can be done about that. Other things I wanted to mention, the city's lake management program. There are a lot of things that the city is doing to reduce the amount of nutrients coming into the lake. There's new land use regulations as part of the Shoreline Master Program. A lot of the stormwater infrastructure work that you all do in terms of cleaning detention ponds, street sweeping, that sort of thing really helps to prevent those nutrients from coming to the lake. There's the I Love Lake outreach and education program. We also do the county does the routine water quality monitoring and lake treatment. Well, the city does the lake treatment and implementation of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program. So the next steps from that study that we did, the recommendations are to continue alum, but rather than doing it every year, to do it only every 1 to 3 years. And there is a threshold that the report identified. If the summer chlorophyll or winter chlorophyll levels are high enough, it will trigger doing a more frequent bloom. Otherwise, it would be every 3rd year. The other steps are to reduce external loading. So things that the city is doing, like we just talked about, as well as community actions, to better assess how much is coming in from the streams, and to continue monitoring the lake and adaptively managing. So real quickly, the community can make a big difference to help the lake. So everybody that lives within that lake watershed can participate in the I Love Lake program. And then these are kind of the phosphorus reducing actions, is you can always choose phosphorus-free fertilizers. You can look for the 0 in the middle of a phosphorus or in the fertilizer bag. There's always 3 numbers on it. It's 0. You can practice natural yard care. This is other things that the city is probably doing outreach on as part of their NPDES outreach program. You can put in your lawn clippings in a green waste bin, or use a mulching mower and leave on the lawn. Do not dump these lawn clippings out, because they'll really quick, easy source of nutrients to the lake. Pet waste, scoop the poop, even in your yard frequently, is one of the best things you can do, not only for nutrients, but so you don't have bacteria and other things where we swim. Regularly inspect your septic systems. And we haven't talked about this much, but ducks and geese do poop a lot, and it is not healthy to feed them even bird seed, because you can end up with an unnaturally high amount. So refraining from feeding the ducks and geese is also good for the lake. And then lastly, creating healthy shorelines. So if any of you do live on the lake and you have some lawn, by replacing that lawn with deeply rooted trees and shrubs, you can still allow for use and access, but it not only will help habitat, but will also help to filter and clean the water before it gets to the lake. It's good for habitat, wildlife. If you have problems with eroding shorelines from, wakes or other waves action, it can help with that. And it can also keep geese off your yard, because they like to see. So if you plant 3-foot tall vegetation or higher, the geese will stay off. And that's all. Thank you. Any questions? And Shannon's here too for any questions as well.
I have a quick question for you. A number of us received a letter from some students at Caballero regarding the lake and the water quality. And there's kind of a perception that the lake is being affected by a fair amount of oil from boats. Is that a problem?
It's always a question that seems to be when we did a lot of research into our outreach program that's parallel to I Love Lake called Lakewise. And that seems to be one of the number one perceptions about what lake pollution is coming from is boats. While there obviously can be, some spills from people filling gas and other thing, it's not seen as necessarily a major source of pollution. And it depends what pollution you're looking at. We don't monitor for those hydrocarbons or oils, so we can't say for sure what they look like. The state does a little bit of that at Random Lakes. I don't know the recent data on Stevens from them, but overall, it's probably, you have such a huge lake too that it dilutes it really fast. So I don't know if that's helpful. Anything you would add to that, Shannon? It's probably a much bigger impact having the oils from the roads that go into the ditches and streams that get there. And that's where those street sweeping and the cleaning of the culverts and things is really helpful.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a quick question, probably for Shannon. This has been a great presentation. Thank you. Great information. Do we or have we ever done anything to either or both educate lakefront homeowners about the need for these deep root vegetation along the lakefront? And are there any programs that exist that would incentivize owners to make those sorts of changes on their properties?
That's a great question. So we do the I Love Lake program. It's a program that we partner with Snohomish Conservation District to do. The city has partnered with the Conservation District for the last 10 years. We focus on natural lawn care, and that has to do with the natural plants there at the lake shore. Last year, we actually did try to do an incentivized program, and we did offer a rebate. If you were putting native plants along your lakefront or even in your homes, we would offer a $250 rebate. I think we may have gotten one person that applied for it. And so it's still been kind of something that we're trying to work on, is to get that outreach out there and what can we do to actually get the information out there. Last year, we did the I Love Lake Day, trying to kind of focus it all on one day, and so that we could have information about it, have information about our program, educate homeowners on that. But yeah, it's been an ongoing thing. So if anyone has any recommendations on how to get that word out there more and how to make this information more available, we're always looking for new ways to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you.
I have a question. You'd mentioned surface oils from streets being probably the biggest oil type pollutant. Are we doing more rain gardens within the city to capture that versus storm drains?
Yeah, so it is something that the city is looking at. We're actually in the process of looking at our engineering and design standards right now. And so we're taking a look at how we construct stormwater conveyance systems, and if there's possibly a benefit for trying to open up some of our stormwater conveyance system versus closed systems. And what that does is essentially, if you have road runoff that's interacting with vegetation and soil and stuff before it's getting to our surface water bodies, it does help with the quality of it versus if it essentially goes into a slide and just slides right down. So there are things that we're looking at as far as that. We do try to promote it's called low impact development is the term that's typically used for rain gardens, bioswales, and development projects. We don't have a lot of infiltration capacity here at our city. Naturally, this is a glacial lake. And so we, in order for developers or when we do any kind of redevelopment to utilize rain gardens as far as to meet like detention or treatment requirements, we don't have a lot of natural capacity to do that, but it's definitely something that we're looking into more as we kind of progress our program and look at our standards. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Marissa, if there was one thing you would do, what would you do with the lake?
The city or as
The
a
lake.
person? What was that?
If there's one thing you could do with the lake, what would it be to improve health?
Well, assuming you're already continuing doing what you're doing, gosh, it's a tough one. I mean, The problem is it's the shoreline health, right? That's what's in the worst condition and it's the hardest thing to overcome. We at the county, we've successfully been able to restore a lot of shorelines through our Lakewise program, and we had a grant that basically we paid for a professional landscape designer to design somebody's plan. That was the biggest incentive that people found that attracted it, is the idea of somebody designing it for them, because the biggest barrier was knowing what to do, what to plant, and how to make it look, and would it be attractive. And so the city of Everett's done a model, something like that with their rain gardens, where they've had people come in to 2 series of workshops. In the first one, they come in and get ideas and come up with an approximate plan. And then the second one, they kind of have a design and go over it. And that seemed to really work really well for rain garden. So that's probably the hardest thing, but honestly, besides that, you're already doing the absolute best thing you can for your lake. So I would just say mostly good job. You're really doing awesome and way ahead of a lot of other groups on making sure proactively that the lake stays in good health. So yeah, I mean, you should pat yourselves on the back.
So you're saying if we, each lakefront homeowner did their vegetation, then our lake would be close to the water clarity of Crater Lake. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sure.
Let's try it and find out.
Yeah, no, at Crater Lake, I think they have to have like a crane type thing that goes down with the sucky disc because it's so deep. Same with Lake
Unfair
Tahoe.
comparison, since it is the world's most clear lake.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
but that would be great if we got closer to that.
No, you have pretty amazing clarity though. And I should say you want some algae. If you don't have some algae, you don't have zooplankton, you don't have fish. So you've got, what I skipped over is you have a really good healthy balance. You have a lot more good beneficial algae and desirable zooplankton species now that the fish and the kokanee is what they want to eat. So yeah.
Shannon, I'd really appreciate your report on the city's lake management program and showing the areas like the detention pond you've cleaned and how often the street sweepers going around and things. That's really helpful to see. But Dave, I'd love to see if they had just an ongoing one that we can kind of see how that progresses, because I know you guys are doing a lot of work in that area.
Just ongoing report of all of the maintenance.
Yeah, just periodic. I mean, just as you guys go along and just seeing how we continue to improve, because I see like process improvements have just been going on at every department in the city, and this is one of the areas that I see continuing to do that as well. So I'd love to just see the success you guys are having.
Yeah, we can absolutely share that more frequently.
And a quick question. Is there any alternative like shallow water plants? And my knowledge on this is fuzzy, but assuming we can get far enough out into the lake where it's public, is there anything we can introduce shallow water that might create a buffer if we can't get buy-in on the actual shoreline?
For habitat, there are definitely things you can plant shallow water. We have our Lakewise Shoreline Planting Guide has a lot of those plants on the county's website. Offhand, like tall stem bulrush. And the really great benefit of those is if people, from the shoreline survey, I can tell you that some people are struggling with erosion from wave action. Their bulkheads are failing, that sort of thing. And planting plants out in front of them provides natural erosion protection. So there's a lot of benefits to that otherwise. So yeah, there's definitely some things filtration wise. Once it's in the water, it's kind of too late.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I have to say that it's been interesting over the last 14 years where we started in with the problems with the aerator and getting into the alum treatments, where it's been some really contentious times on the council when we were talking about the costs of all those kinds of things and what are we really going to do. And we always spent the money. We always made it a priority for us. And I don't think we're ever going to change that. It is one of the best things that we have about Lake Stevens is the lake, besides our school district and those and other things that they have. But the lake is, it's right there in the front. But it has been interesting over the past 14 years watching this process, and all of a sudden the aerator doesn't work anymore. And it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And it costs more to take it out of the water and it doesn't just leave it there. I don't want, all these things we had to go for. But it's been really interesting, and I'm very happy about the report that you brought to us tonight. I am a little bit more interested in some of the things that you did not cover with the other algae type things. So I'm going to delve into that a little bit more myself. I get into those kinds of things, so. But thank you very much for coming and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, great report, but I don't like the poor rating, so we're gonna get to work.
I used to think the aerator was a vacuum. Like a vacuum, and then people would call and say, when you're gonna turn the vacuum on?
That's amazing.
The Dyson.
Was it
All right, great report.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to citizens' comments. We will first go to anyone online who has comments.
I don't see any hands. So anybody that's online on Zoom that'd like to speak to the council, if you can use or raise your digital hand, I can bring you into the meeting. No, nobody.
Okay, great. So I have one green sheet from a new citizen. Not sure. Is there Mary Dickinson in the crowd?
First of all, wow, I am so glad to be here and hear the story about the strength of a lake. That's wonderful. But I'm here tonight because of Tina Mandela, and I'm so sorry she's not here. She is incredible, as has been said already. And when I was doorbelling like crazy, I talked to her, and I also talked to a gentleman named Brian Smith. And a woman reached out to me and said, my husband and I, she was very elderly and not well, we have gotten into big trouble, and these people that wanted to rent part of our house are taking advantage, and we may have to move. And I reached out to the Volunteers of America, and they totally got that taken care of. That family was taken care of, and that's just a separate story. But Volunteers of America is amazing, and I'm really, really happy that they're over at the food bank now.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, great. Let's move on to council business, council president.
Who would like to start? Councilmember Daughtry.
I attended the skip meeting this morning for a little while till all of a sudden I lost signal. The biggest thing there's two things that that they talked about was one is what's going down on Olympia and talking about what might happen to the loss of transportation dollars, depending on a citizens initiative to get rid of the carbon tax. So if that happens, there could have some problems in the budget, transportation budget. The other thing they talked about was they had somebody come in and do a presentation on the trestle study. So they had WashDOT and their consultant that's doing the study, and not too sure what's going on with that. It just they're talking about, what did you say, 2018 numbers? 2018 cost data for the trestle, and it just doesn't seem like they're keeping up with what's going on. So they're doing the study, the 1.2 million or whatever they're spending on that now. They're looking, and they didn't even have in the study to look at the west side problems getting into Everett. That wasn't even part of the study. It was just part of it, just mostly do 4 lanes and that kind of thing. So not really, I don't think I'm very happy with the report that we got. It just didn't seem right. So I don't know.
Is this a finalized report?
No, it's not. It's just one of the studies that, we did the study 2018. We did that study. They're supposed to do the study for the east side, which is, Sunnyside and all that. That already got done, I think. And now this is the newest one that started 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
No, so this is just the west side interchange. And they started it it came out of that budget came out of last year's money. So they started the last stuff.
Yeah, we got the money in the budget 4 years ago and they spent it now.
Yeah.
But it just didn't, I don't know. It seemed like it's a waste to me. That's just the way I felt.
Could we possibly have them come before us at a workshop?
I don't know that we could ask them, but they're more focused on the west side, not the east side. And there's going to be an east side study done at some point. But yeah, we can have them come. We can ask WSDOT.
I think from the standpoint, we're all curious and we need to be watching what's going on. Without doing that, they tend to forget about us.
I was just gonna say, we need them to know that we're paying attention.
Yeah, exactly.
We can reach out to them and see what they say.
We were the
It
ones
was interesting.
dinging the bell. down in
Right, yeah.
DC and everywhere about this project. So it's funny.
One of the interesting things about their study was their population growth studies, and Lake Stevens was prominent in the discussion this morning. You know, Lake Stevens came up all the time in his discussion. Lake Stevens and Linwood, because we're basically neck and neck with our population. So yeah, they all are looking at us, but it just doesn't look like anything's happening. And, you know, the costs are going up. We know that, but it just didn't seem like there's a lot of attention given to it right now. And then they're trying to make an excuse. Well, we just don't have the money in the budget to fix it. You got to make it a priority. The other thing that he said, well, yeah, we're studying the trestle because it doesn't meet any of the standards for earthquake stuff. Well, yeah, you better start looking at it.
Well, and to think about it, even, I think today during that meeting, they talked about that side of it. They're looking at having a plan finalized by the end of 25, early 26.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I had.
Well, again, Councilmember Georgestad's comment, we need to be watchful of them, I guess, and let them know that we're watchful. Otherwise, this thing's just, I mean, you've been on the council for how many, 28 years or whatever. And it's like, you know, it's the ongoing discussion point
been
every
talking about
4
this
years.
For years and years and years.
Yeah, we need to shine the light on it, I guess, and
We'll be George Jetsoning around by the time they get that.
yeah. Okay. Councilmember Donahue.
Yes, thank you. So on the 21st, I attended the Planning Commission meeting. It was in many ways a continuation of the prior discussion. This one focused on employment growth targets and climate targets and how that will be integrated into the comp plan. On the employment side, the takeaways were the city has demonstrated an ability to exceed its employment growth targets for the last decade. And the belief is that only limited zoning changes will be needed to accommodate projected employment growth. Be able to handle it primarily with updated policies and measures. And then on the climate side, there is a strong likelihood that additional state regulations will change before 2029. And so the city's not adopting any standalone climate measures. They'll be integrating goals and strategies based on state guidance and our new climate sustainability plan. And then on Sunday, I joined Mayor Gailey and Councilmember Tagent for the plunge out in the lake. Oh, and sorry, Kim, I'm sorry, Kim too, or Councilmember Shipman. And yeah, it was very cold. That's all I have.
Councilmember Shipman.
Well, I did the popsicles as well and they had a great turnout. A lot of people were there. They raised $12,000 for Special Olympics. So, and a lot more people than last year from what I understand. So that's pretty exciting to see the community become more involved in. I was impressed because the last council member or meeting, I thought I was going to be the only one there and the mayor was there and we had 2 other council members. So that was great. I attended the school board meeting on February 21st, and this time it was at the high school. I don't know if you know this, but they have 2 meetings a month. The first meeting's at the school district building, the administrative building, and then the next one they focus on a school within our district. So that varies every month. So this time it was at the high school. And it was pretty impressive. So when you walked up, they had their drum line playing and their cheerleaders out front. So we were going in there for the school board meeting. I felt like we were going to a football game. I mean, it was a lot going on out front. And then we got in there and the culinary department got to show their stuff. And so they had made little pudding cups that were protein pudding. They made cookies. They had skewers with fruit. And the way they had it all laid out, you would have thought a caterer had come in and did that. It was very impressive. And whenever they have it at the schools, they always have the principal and their support staff come up and talk and showcase some things. So they're really interesting to go to, and I encourage you to go. And they always release you after that. You know, if you want to leave, they'll say, okay, you don't have to leave, go ahead and leave, because now we're going to do the boring stuff. But it does highlight some of the things going on at our schools. They moved into their budget. We've got a few schools, elementary schools here in Lake Stevens, that qualify for some matching funds from the state. But again, just like we're talking about the trestle, the costs have gone up tremendously just since Stevens Creek was built. They're factoring in at about a 5.5% increase in cost. Between this is when, you know, we want to propose this is when we think we're going to be able to build it. They have to take, these are the costs for proposing it, and they're adding at this point about 5.5%. To put it into perspective, I don't remember the exact numbers, but Stevens Creek's was 300 and some a square foot to build. Now we're looking at over 500 a square foot to build a school. So they're going to do some workshops because we can't afford, literally, they were all in consensus. We cannot afford to do what we need to do. So they are doing some workshops to try and pare things down, and hopefully we'll have a little more specifics on where we're moving forward from there. But good job to the culinary department and all of them. They put on a really good show. The other person that was talking, we've won so many awards too. If you don't ever go to these, I'm trying to remember because it was new to me. The CTE program, which is their Career and Technical Education Center, is also just an amazing program that offers apprenticeships and looks at our high schoolers and encourages them to start thinking forward. What are you going to do next? They do have some struggles with apprenticeships within the trades, just simply because of liability and L&I. They have to be 18. So a lot of our seniors aren't 18 yet, but it was a fun meeting to attend.
Councilmember Georgetown?
Thank you. Just really briefly, as the liaison to the Snohomish Regional Fire group, I had a conversation with Chief O'Brien. He's got some information he'd like to bring to the council, just kind of plans regarding the levy passing and their next steps. And so he and I are meeting, and I'll bring that information back after we meet. Thanks.
Councilmember Ewing?
Nothing for me.
Councilmember Tadget?
Did the polar bear plunge? I want to say, I want to say, Chief, great job, you and your team. I saw a video from last year, and the numbers were significantly greater this year. There was Councilman Donahue and I jumped off the dock last year, got to see that. But this year there was, I'd say, double the amount of people that were there the year before. So great thing, good for Special Olympics. Thanks, Chief.
Brave souls. I have nothing.
Or foolish.
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, great. Just a couple of things. I had a really cool opportunity to speak at an Eagle Scout of Honor event for our local Boy Scout Troop 42. Great kids there, all Lake Stevens kids, and good to see them advancing in their progress. Also took the opportunity to attend the Lake Stevens Lacrosse Club fundraiser on Sunday or Saturday. And what a great event. Lots of people there. Great organization. Kind of a really new organization that has lacrosse teams here in the city. So it's good to see them flourishing. Last week, I took an opportunity to attend the AWC Mayor's Exchange. Where mayors get together and talk about mayor stuff. And then I attended that trestle meeting today with WASTOD. So cool. Let's move forward with, I don't have any city department reports. Can I get a motion to pass the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Sorry, the second, was that Councilor Jorstad?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so with that, we're going to hold a public hearing tonight on code cleanup. With that, I'll open the public hearing and I'll hand the mic off to David.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Gailey, council members. David Levitan, Senior Planner. Just going to do a quick PowerPoint just to provide a general overview of the process, highlight a couple of the recommendations from the Planning Commission and some recent changes based on some feedback from the Department of Commerce. And then I would open it up to the council for any questions on specific code amendments towards the end of the presentation. So with that. All right, so this is the public hearing for the code cleanup, land use application number 2022-0082. So just a little bit on the process. So this was actually started back in late 2022, was relatively limited in scope, kind of focused on addressing kind of inconsistent code language, improving clarity in the code, kind of removing redundancies or outdated information. This was actually then expanded in spring of 2023. City decided to incorporate some of the recent state legislation specifically related to middle housing and accessory dwelling units, pull that in. We were also in the process of developing a housing action plan. So kind of developed a lot of the goals and policies and actions and strategies that was adopted last spring, and now are ready to adopt some of that code language to implement those goals and policies. The Planning Commission has held a number of work sessions over the last year, most recently on August 21st and December 6th. Kind of walked through some of the draft code language, provided their initial feedback. That was incorporated into an updated version that was then shared with the City Council on January 9th. Discussed a couple of different topics, storage facilities within sub areas, some kind of health and social service facilities, a couple other items of interest to the City Council, and then incorporated some of that feedback back into the draft that went before the Planning Commission for their public hearing, which I'll get to in a bit. Just a reminder, there were basically 4 categories of code amendments, kind of at the lowest level housekeeping code amendments, just basically cleaning up the code, outdated information, updating language for gender neutrality, then some minor updates for category 2, updated definitions. And then category 3 was kind of where the bulk of the work went into, and there was the state legislation related to House Bills 1110 and 1337 from the 2023 legislative session. Kind of some of the more topical, some of the topics like whether to allow storage facilities within sub areas. So those were within category 3. And then category 4 were some minor process code amendments. So there is a standalone process code amendment currently in development that will basically address multiple chapters of the Lake Stevens Municipal Code to try to make it a little bit more streamlined. Right now, there is information across chapters 1416A, 1416B, and 1416C. So we tried to tackle a few of the low-hanging fruit related to that, such as bonds and other security mechanisms, and then also just clarifying the different types of application review types. So as I mentioned, the Planning Commission held their public hearing about 6 weeks ago on January 17th. There was public notice issued for that meeting. The city did not receive any written public comments or receive any oral testimony at that public hearing. We walked through some of the major code amendments, really focused on a lot of the housing work, and then also really what largely drove the conversation at that meeting was on the issue of allowing storage facilities on a limited basis within sub areas, specifically within sub areas with a zoning designation of commercial district or CD. And there were some concerns from planning commissioners that as far as, the potential prevalence, the storage facilities popping up a little bit more, identifying that there are already multiple kind of major corridors into the city that had storage facilities. And so what we tried to focus on was that this would be on a very limited basis. It's intended, it would require an administrative conditional use permit within the commercial district, within sub areas. So that's a type 2 land use designation. land use application where specific approval criteria would need to be met, and they would need to demonstrate compliance with that approval criteria, including consistency with the comprehensive plan. It would be much more limited than what is allowed within the commercial district outside of sub areas. There's not a whole lot of land that's zoned commercial district outside of those sub areas. Most of our commercial and other employment growth is within our three adopted sub areas. That's a conscious decision by the city to focus our employment growth within those areas. So this is really meant to accommodate on a very limited basis on sites where they can kind of show a connection between either a primary or secondary permitted use. And this would be basically an incidental supporting use that could not exceed 15% of the non-residential floor area within that development. So staff's thought, in making the findings with this would be on a limited basis. And ultimately the Planning Commission was comfortable with that language, as well as the rest of the amendments that were included in LUA 2022-0082. And they ultimately made a unanimous recommendation to City Council to approve the code amendment. So I'm just going to get into a little bit on the process then. So as with other code amendments, we're required to send our notice of intention to adopt a code amendment to the Department of Commerce 60 days in advance of the potential City Council adoption. So we did that back in December of 2023. In late January, we received comments back from the Department of Commerce. They basically evaluated the code language for consistency with House Bills 1110 and 1337. Identified a couple of topics that we had missed within the code. So since that time, we've incorporated those proposed revisions and those comments from the Department of Commerce into the updated version that's featured in draft ordinance 1179, which is attachment 1 in your packet tonight. We also issued a SEPA determination of non-significance back on January 4th, concurrently with the notice of public hearing for the Planning Commission public hearing. We did not receive any public agency or tribal comments in response to that DNS. And then as required for this public hearing, issued a notice of public hearing back on February 16th and again on February 23rd within the Herald, and have not received any public comments in response to that. So just did want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that have been made since the Planning Commission public hearing back on January 16th. This a little bit. So this one in particular is in regards to ADUs. So that is covered in ordinance section 12. So it's updates to chapter 1444, which are our supplemental use regulations, including those regulations for accessory dwelling units. So one of the comments that we received from the Department of Commerce was that we had not incorporated a couple of the required components within HB 1337. That includes not requiring a setback from a rear lot line when it's located along an alley, unless it's an alley that is regularly plowed for snow. So we did incorporate that into Ordinance 1179. I did want to point out that as I was reviewing this earlier today, I did notice that I inadvertently exempted setbacks from both the side and a rear property line, and that wasn't intended. And so as part of any action tonight, I would propose that that motion include that motion basically note that this section be revised so that it would only apply, that exemption would only apply to rear property lines and not to side property lines. The other item that Department of Commerce staff had pointed out was that the House bill does allow for the conversion of existing structures. If those existing structures are non-conforming either to setbacks or to lot coverage or impervious surface areas, they still are allowed, so they would be considered legal non-conforming. Would still need to deal with all the other code regulations for things like stormwater management. But if, say, somebody was already at their 40% impervious maximum and they wanted to, or they were over that, and then they wanted to convert an existing building into an accessory dwelling unit, they would be able to do so. Or if they were located within just a few feet of a rear yard setback when they would normally need 15 feet, they would be able to do that as well. So those have both been incorporated into the ordinance tonight. The other major component of the Department of Commerce's comments were on middle housing, which is ordinance section 13. So if you look on page 127 of your packets, one of the items that we had not incorporated in is that the way that House Bill 1110 reads for what are called tier 2 cities, like the city of Lake Stevens, where you have a population between 25,000 and 75,000 people, by right on any lot that's zoned predominantly for residential use, so would allow a detached single family residence. On that same lot, you're allowed to do a duplex or another 2-unit configuration. So say in the R6 zone, you need a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet for a detached single family residence. You're now with code language implementing House Bill 1110, you would be able to do a duplex on the same size lot. So you could do a duplex on a 6,000 square foot lot as well. That's generally the maximum allowed in Lake Stevens, with the exception of if the development is located within 1/4 mile of a major transit stop, or if they provide at least one affordable housing unit, and that would be at 80% of area median income for sale units and 60% of area median income for rental units, they would be able to do up to 4 units on that same size lot. They would still be subject to all of the other development regulations. So it would be hard to say do a 4-plex on a really small lot in the R6 zone, just because you'd be running up against impervious surface maximums, parking requirements. And so basically, we've just incorporated the Department of Commerce comments to include language that allows for up to 4 units if they either are within 1/4 mile of a major transit stop or provide that affordable housing. And then one of the other changes that's been made as we were making those changes to incorporate the Department of Commerce comments, we noticed that there was some redundancy between section 1448.020 and then chapter 1446 Part 3. So we are proposing to delete that section 1448.020 and incorporate that into 1446. And then kind of related to this, but actually something that just came up as part of a discussion with the potential applicant, was the city was made aware that there's currently an inconsistency between our permissible uses table within chapter 1440, and then within the kind of the innovative housing code within chapter 1446. So currently in the use table, it lists a number of different zoning districts, including the waterfront residential and the PBD zones, where cottage housing is listed as a permissible use in chapter 1440. But then when you actually go to the cottage housing code in section 1446-100, it currently only lists R6, RA12, and multifamily residential, or MFR. So we wanted to make sure that those 2 sections were consistent. We went back through a little bit of the legislative history, kind of took into account some of the discussions that have been had over the last several years related to middle housing and infill housing, and implementing zoning districts for that. The infill housing code currently applies to the R4, R6, and RA12 zones. It does not apply to the waterfront residential zone, just given kind of the unique characteristics and the presence basically of a critical area that lines the entirety of Lake Stevens, and that does have an impact on the development potential. So we wanted to make sure that the cottage housing, the applicable zoning districts for cottage housing were consistent with those for the other innovative and infill housing options. So what we are proposing is that in both 1446 and in chapter 1440, that the zoning districts where cottage housing would be allowed are the R4, R6, RA12, and MFR zones. And so those are kind of the substantive changes that have been made. Also, in addition to the one item that I had identified as far as, that staff is proposing for a minor amendment to the ordinance as it was presented in the packet, the city attorney also reviewed this and focused more just on some of the, kind of minor Scrivener's errors and other kind of minor administrative issues. So these are them in which the city attorney and staff in support would propose be incorporated in any motion that is made tonight, is basically to reflect these minor changes to the ordinance. So they're as simple as within section 1, just providing a little bit more specificity to subsection C related, clarifying that the amendments of the code are set forth in this ordinance. Then adding that additional subsection D. Within section 6, just providing a little bit more specificity to the definition of accessory dwelling unit to clarify that this is an additional dwelling unit. You have your primary residential unit, which is the primary residence, and this, it's within the definition accessory, but just more clarity is sometimes better. Within section 7, we're proposing to revise the ordinance to just kind of change the language just a little bit. Instead of saying at the end of the bonding period, it would be before the end of the bonding period. And then section 14, which is on packet page 131, just revising a couple of the words instead of using the term noted, making it a little bit more consistent with the terminology that we typically use within the planning and zoning world, which is permitted or authorized. And so this being a type 6 legislative land use application, it is required to meet certain criteria and findings that are included in Lake Stevens Municipal Code, section 1416 CO 75. In both the staff report and the Planning Commission recommendation, findings were made that the proposal does meet these approval criteria, including consistency with the comp plan. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the public will have an opportunity to provide any oral testimony. And following that and deliberations from the city council and any questions that they have of staff is recommending that the city council act upon the Planning Commission's recommendation with the additions and revisions as previously discussed by staff, and approve ordinance 1179 with any additional proposed revisions from the city council. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question about ADUs.
Yeah.
As I was looking, it's on page 124 and 125. It says if an ADU is completely located on a single floor within the footprint of the primary residential unit or an existing legal accessory structure, the director or designee may allow an increase in ADU size to efficiently use the floor area. And saying so as long as all their standards set forth. It says this flexibility is not intended to allow the division of larger residences into separate duplexes or two-family conversions, which are subject to a different section. So I guess, do ADUs have to be owner occupied? And when I was reading that, what would the determination be between taking an ADU and dividing it into, to two, or turning it into a duplex? Because and if you scroll down further on to page 125, it says, per the definitions, ADUs are considered separate dwelling units and provide complete independent living facilities separate from those of the primary residence. So in one section, it talks about putting them within the primary residence. And then you scroll down a little further and it says they're separate. And it doesn't really clarify if the ADU, does it have to be owner occupied or not? Because if it's not owner occupied, then it would be a duplex. Am I understanding that?
So there is not an owner occupancy requirement. And so kind of the intent of this language was for a situation where you say so per the state regulations, we have to have, for the maximum size of an ADU, it has to be at least 1,000 square feet. You can't have a cap on ADUs that's less than 1,000 square feet. So what that language is trying to address, say you had a 2,200 square foot home that was 1,100 up and 1,100 down. And so if somebody wanted to convert one of those floors to an accessory dwelling unit, so they would have their 1,100 square foot kind of primary residence, what would be considered an attached ADU would be kind of say the ground floor would be an attached ADU. So I did want to kind of clarify. So separate is not meaning detached. It's meaning separate. It's basically kind of a fully self-contained unit. So it doesn't need the use of the kitchen within the primary unit. It doesn't have to use the bathrooms or any of the other facilities. It's basically considered an independent unit. So that might have been a better term to use. But getting back to my example, so say you had a 2,200 square foot home, it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to say, yeah, you can use 1,000 square feet of that 1,100 square feet on the ground floor, but you have to leave the other 100 square feet alone. So this provides some flexibility to the director to basically say, yeah, we've evaluated it. It exceeds the 1,000 square foot maximum, but it would make more sense to just fully utilize that 1,100 square feet as an ADU instead of making them basically put up a wall and not use that additional 100 square feet. But we're trying to distinguish and kind of within the duplex language and the two-family conversions to say you had a 4,000 square foot home that was 2,000 square feet up and 2,000 square feet down. That's a little bit different if somebody's saying, hey, I want the entire ground floor to be considered an ADU. That's a much larger unit. It has, more bedrooms. It has more potential impacts. We would consider that to be a duplex unit because it's at 2,000 square feet. That's a pretty large home. And so that's where we're trying to kind of distinguish between those two scenarios.
And so in that scenario, one of those floors would be owner occupied.
So there,
Or because it's you're talking primary residence, an additional space.
yeah, so
So how would you determine which was primary residence and how is that clarified?
for which situation? So
Well, when you're talking about dividing up two different floors, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but the wording in here has within the footprint of the primary residential unit. So if both are rented out equally, like you're describing, 1,000 foot upstairs, 1,000 foot downstairs, but the owner doesn't live there, then how is there a primary resident and it's not a duplex?
well, so you basically would be converting an existing detached single family home into a home that has an attached ADU. So the primary does not have to do with owner occupancy. There is no owner occupancy requirement for either unit, and that's actually at the state level. And so, need to kind of separate the term kind of primary and, there isn't a direct association between the primary residential unit and the housing tenure or the owner occupancy. So in that situation, yeah, you would assign one, basically, you would be allowing, one of those units to be considered the ADU and one of those to basically consider still the single family home that hasn't been converted into a separate attached dwelling unit. And that's a little bit of a different situation. And what we were trying to distinguish for a larger home where you're creating basically two 2,000 square foot units, we would consider that a duplex because it's basically double the size of what the maximum allowable accessory dwelling unit space is.
Okay, thank you.
And I think I'm going to add one other thing to that. Excuse me. So within, within the zoning code, there's another section that we haven't talked about here that would be used to make this decision. So in chapter 1416C, there's an entire section devoted to administration and administrative decisions. And this would be considered what's a de minimis decision. So we would look at the application, we would look at the function, and through the criteria in that chapter, we would determine, okay, is it within a reasonable range of the ADU size? And if that's the case, and like the example that David provided of 1,100 square feet versus 1,000 square feet, that would be a reasonable connection. That's not going to create a sea change or a different application of standards. If it was a 4,000, 5,000 square foot house on the lake, and they wanted to have a 2,500 square foot ADU, we would say, no, that is a conversion to a duplex. That's well beyond a reasonable percentage change, which would have a more intensive use, bedroom count, et cetera. So that's how we would administer that section of the code. And I will point out that the code citation we have in there now is this has been an evolving process. We actually need to modify that last code section because that is the code section David explained earlier that now we've merged into the innovative housing. So this last citation of the 020 would go away.
Thank you.
Is that clear? As much as the lake is.
Yeah, and I would just note that, sorry, well, yeah, whether it's, you know, an ADU or a duplex, you know, so 1330, House Bill 1337 deals with ADUs. House Bill 1110 basically legalizes duplexes anywhere where a single family residence is allowed. So somebody would still be able to convert their 4,000 square foot home into two 2,000 square foot duplex units, even within, say, the waterfront residential zoning district, just for the purposes of charging impact fees and evaluating impacts and the process that they need to go through. It's a slightly different process. So we wanted to make sure we distinguish the situation like that and the fees that they'd be subject to. You're going to obviously have more impacts on the city's infrastructure if you have, you know, a family of 5 living in a 2,000 square foot unit versus, you know, a family of 2 or 3 living within 1,000 square feet, and that's reflected in our impact fees.
David, thank you for the report, and I appreciate the embedded planning commission meeting recordings that are embedded in there. It's really helpful to have that so accessible. You did mention impervious surface, and with the addition of allowing now 2 ADUs per lot, is there any change to the impervious surface requirements with the addition of the ADUs that are now allowed?
We are not. And so if somebody was right at 40% and they wanted to build 2 new detached ADUs, they would not be able to do that. So we aren't proposing any changes. There's no requirements within the legislation that we bump up our maximum impervious services. Basically, it says that you need to allow them, but they need to be able to, they're treated as single family residences. Basically, they need to follow the same development standards that any other development in that process is. And, you know, we believe that, you know, it's still important to have those maximum impervious surface areas. Obviously, we've had a discussion tonight about, you know, water quality, and especially along the lake, and our whole watershed largely feeding into the lake. And so we're wanting to be cognizant and aware of that. So we are not proposing any bumps up. The one exception is that if there is an existing structure and there, you know, say it was just a detached garage and they were already at 50% of impervious surface, and then they wanted to convert that detached garage into an ADU, they would be allowed to do that, even though they would be considered legal non-conforming to impervious surface areas, and we might be able to, you know, prohibit that change of use to something else. But if they're proposing to change that from a garage to an ADU, we wouldn't be able to prohibit that change of use.
Thank you.
So I guess that begs the question, if we're not willing to deviate from our existing impervious surface, how do you accomplish these goals? You just said that you can't do it.
Well, I'm saying as far as try to encourage the development of ADUs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the intent, I think, is to allow them, to encourage them, but still subject them to standards that would apply. I mean.
Yeah, but the whole idea is to create density within our urban area. And what you just said, you can't do that. it says on paper, you might be able to do it, but from a physical standpoint of building something, you can't accomplish that with the same impervious surface requirements as a single family home.
Well, I think there are certain lots in the city that are right up against that 40% maximum, especially, developments that have been built more recently, and house sizes have definitely gotten bigger, impervious surface has gone up, but we would have to do some analysis as far as what the average and maximum impervious surface. I would say that there are still thousands and thousands of residential lots that are closer to 15 or 20% lot coverage and impervious surface coverage on their lots. So they still would have plenty of room for accessory dwelling units. I think there's not intended to be a guarantee that every single lot in the city of Lake Stevens would be able to accommodate at least a detached ADU. And that's why there are some provisions within the House bill related to the city's ability to factor in things like critical areas. And, to potentially limit the development of ADUs even where they're, permitted under the House bill. So yeah, if the direction from city council is that they'd like to explore ways to increase the maximum impervious surface area so that it would be feasible on pretty much any lot in the city to accommodate an ADU, that's obviously a larger policy discussion and something, that we can continue to have. We have through June of 2025 to comply with the House bills. We felt like we were in a pretty good spot as far as we already allowed so much middle housing. We already allowed detached ADUs. We've had our housing action plan, so we felt that we were ready to fully implement 1337 and 1110. But if there is additional direction from city council, that's something that staff is happy to explore.
So I guess a follow-up to that is how difficult would it be to assess each of the residential units and their impervious surface? Because I know when I did, in addition to my place, I had to do my own calculations and figure that out to make sure I wasn't bumping up against those. But I know
They do it through satellite imagery. They did it to my house just by boom, 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 oh, you've got 40%.
But as far as like, if we asked you to do that, how time intensive would that be to say, hey, we've got 14,000 residential units that are attached to sewer. How many of those, that seems pretty time intensive to me.
We can do this in a different way, and we have done this in a different way. So I would say for the majority of houses built in the city over the last 10 years, they're going to be between 40 and 65% impervious surface, depending on the zone. What we've done as part of our comprehensive plan update and our land use capacity analysis, we've looked at our buildable lands report. So those are the remaining buildable lands the city has defined as vacant lands, partially used or redevelopable. And we've focused a lot of our attention on the partially used and redevelopable properties. And those are the properties that are going to be substantially inside the northern part of the city that are on larger lots, maybe some areas that have been incorporated from the counties. So those are areas with zoning designation somewhere between the R4 and the R6 that have capacity. Those are the lots that we've already identified that do have the potential to do duplexes or ADUs pretty easily. So we've done that work already in a little bit different way, not using lot coverage as the limiting factor, because that's going to vary by your zone. And I don't recall what the number we came up with for the development capacity. I don't know if you remember that, but we had several hundred additional units that we've identified that would have capacity for redevelopment, that have larger lots that could support this more intensive type of development that these House bills were really generated to accomplish more density in these larger lot situations, urban situations.
So I have a question about middle housing again. I believe it was section 13 where they're talking about being able to have 4 units on a lot if one of those units was affordable housing. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the way that I'm looking at this is that the definition of affordable housing in RCW 47.30, or no, I'm sorry, 36.7A, it talks about the mean or the median income for the county, not for the city, as the basis for the affordable housing computation. And if we use that right now from 2023 numbers, a renter would be limited, they would be limited to $1,401 for rent and utilities. So for the housing costs, that's their 30% of their income, it's 1,401. For an owner or a sale of the house, it would be all of the mortgage and utilities and everything is 1,868.40. So that would be affordable housing. It also gets adjusted for size of household, I guess. I'm not sure how those numbers work out. I can't get that right now. So just using those as a baseline though, how would we manage knowing or ensuring that those numbers are what's being done on that lot for one of those affordable housing units?
Yeah, so we would need to develop a program and have some sort of review process and certification process for that. I don't think Russ has obviously been here longer than I have.
We don't have a specific program ourselves, but that's something that we could generate really quickly. Usually you cooperate through a housing agency to sort of manage that, and they assign an affordability covenant to that property that's on a record of title that establishes what that is, and then it sort of goes back to the private owners to ensure that that maintains consistent, but the mechanism is a covenant on title.
So follow-on question, and that would be, what if they don't maintain it? Then what?
Don't have an answer.
If you were to refinance that house at today's interest rates versus you built it under 3 years ago interest rates, everything changes.
Right. Exactly.
Quick question for you, Russ. I know this is probably maybe a little bit outside this, what we're talking about here, but on page 113, you talk about the alternate decision criteria for determining lot status, and it says the planning director or designate may determine that a parcel is a legal lot of record when the parcel meets one or more of the following. Shouldn't that say shall determine?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
It's just, I think it was a may because it's not an automatic in the term that we will provide lot status.
but
But if
did-
it provides that we can make that decision either way, a shall is fine.
Yeah, okay, because that's not it's not a choice, right? The other question I have for you is my understanding on the model homes section here. For some reason, we don't allow model homes to be the actual model home building permit to be submitted until the final plat is recorded. Is that correct?
That is not correct. We accept model building homes prior to final plat recording.
You do, okay, all right.
So just to clarify, that's based on a percentage of the number of homes in the
Right.
plat. So you're
Yes.
allowed a certain percentage,
Yeah,
up to a maximum of 5, I believe.
gotcha.
Any other questions? Dave?
Possibly.
We can ask questions later. We could open for the public comment and finish that part.
Yeah, we move to public comments. then do that.
Sure.
Yep.
No problem.
So a great presentation, David. I'm going to move to public comments on this public hearing. Is there anybody who wishes to provide public comments on just this topic? Anyone online?
I don't see anybody online. So again, this is for ordinance 1179, public hearing on the code cleanup. Please raise your digital hand if you'd like to speak to council. Nope.
Nobody, and there's nobody in the audience. Not that there's nobody in the audience, but there's no citizens to provide comments in the audience. So with that, I'm going to close the public comments portion of the hearing. David, do you have any additional information?
No, happy to continue to answer questions about any of the applicable code sections.
Okay, do we have any additional questions for David? I'm hearing none. So with that, I would like to open the public hearing up to discussion within the council on this subject.
I guess to Gary's point, is wondering what the appetite is for the council for adjusting the impervious surface, in light of the comments we had about the limited availability of lots in the city for ADUs.
I'm open to adjusting it.
Yes.
That-
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
No.
is that a decision that needs to be made in order to move this code cleanup forward, or would that be something that we would discuss at a later date?
Or
Or,
to be independent.
What was that, Steve?
I said, imagine that would be independent. The changing the impervious surface would be independent because I didn't see anything in there specifically referencing that. It's just. I guess the thing that jumped out at me that I didn't realize that there were allowed 2 ADUs, and that's why I checked with Russ. I was like, I thought I misread it. And I was like, no, that would the change with the state law that they're now allowing 2. And I was like, well, if you can't even allow 1, and most of the places, we're not going to get the density that Gary's talking about to meet our housing targets. So I mean, that's what I'm looking at.
yeah, I'm very open to having further discussion and getting more information about that. I wouldn't want that to hold up this process. I guess.
Agreed.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess I would like more information as well, given what we heard about surface water issues and just kind of having a better understanding of how not raising that would impact our ability to meet our housing targets versus the ecological impact of raising it.
Okay, not hearing any more discussion. We are going to move to an action on this so the council can move to approve. You can delay this action or you can not approve this action, which would be in the form of a motion on the ordinance.
I would move to approve ordinance number 1179, amending multiple Lake Stevens Municipal Code chapters with the change noted by Mr. Leviton regarding the side border, removing that section, just noting the back border.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Can we ask for maybe a couple more clarifications on that?
Yes.
And to also include the suggestions from the city attorney and the other piece of errata that was pointed out during our discussion?
Yes, sorry, I thought that was all included. So
Okay.
I would amend my motion to include this, all of the suggestions that were on the slide that we were shown by the city attorney.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay, so we got 2 things. We have an amendment to deal with first, and we have the amendment seconded. And do we have any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and back on the original motion, do we have any discussion on that motion?
To approve the ordinance 1179
Correct.
with the amendments.
Hearing no discussion on that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thanks for your work, David, on that. Great stuff.
Can I just, one more comment? I just want to reiterate, Councilman Ewing brought this up. The council staff report with the links embedded to take us to the documents, super helpful. Thank you so much for putting that together in that way. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome.
All right, great. Let's move to action item A, agreement with Chevron Wax.
Thank you,
Lori.
Mayor. That was meant to say agreement, so.
Oh, I thought that was a new word.
No, thank you. It was a typo. Thank you.
I was gonna hit.
Mhm.
Lori, you have the floor.
Great.
Thank you and good evening, Council. My name is Lori Erickson. I am the Public Works Analyst. And tonight I will be presenting a report out for some program and process improvement that I have been co-facilitating along with members of our Finance Department. I want to give you just a small amount of background as to how this got started and what spurred it. Essentially, I was approached a few months ago by some members in the police department who wanted to explore better ways for us to manage our citywide fuel program. In short, the current process takes a significant amount of time for staff to administer, so we started looking for more effective and efficient ways to run our fuel program moving forward. So I will dive into more of the specifics throughout this short presentation, but please know that staff are recommending that the city move towards a WEX program. Before I dive into what WEX is, just know that it's not an acronym. I recently learned that it's actually not an acronym, but it's a company that administers or manages multiple fuel card programs that are available for both private and government sectors. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move us forward and give you an overview on how the program works today. So currently, what we have at our Public Works shop is a fuel pump station. The fuel pump offers both diesel and unleaded gas, and all employees who have fuel access fuel there. The fueling is currently done with our employee badges, and so that is the main way of tracking is with the actual badge itself. The police department also has what's called COM data cards. It's a type of fuel card program where they can fuel up in other stations around the city whenever they need to. The fuel that's purchased for the Public Works pump is purchased in bulk. So as far as the challenges with the current state process, at a high level, the reporting and monitoring is very limited. It takes a lot of time to pull the data that we need and to get the data in a format that's actually usable. There are no exception notifications in the current process and current program, meaning that if somebody were to go fill up with a significantly higher amount of fuel, there's no way to actually get an instant notification of that anomaly. The current state process is not in compliance with the state auditor's best practice around fuel monitoring. And essentially what that best practice is aimed at is trying to help us to be able to prevent fraud. The location of the Public Works fuel station is not really convenient for the police department, and they are the #1 consumer of the fuel. And in our current process, we don't have the ability to sync with our current fleet management systems, and this is then resulting in extra data entry by staff. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over our fuel usage for 2023. So what this slide tells us is that our fuel consumption and what the cost was for the fuel that we spent in 2023. We had a total of approximately 3,200 transactions at this Public Works pump station, and we spent just over $170,000 on fuel. Of that, about 75% of it was unleaded and 25% was diesel. The police department was approximately 47% of that consumption, followed by Public Works and Parks using a large chunk of it as well. So after we analyzed the issues with our current state process and we conducted a stakeholder analysis to consider employees' needs and wants in the future state, we started looking into options that would help us to make the biggest improvement. We took a deep dive into 2 programs. One is a Chevron WEX program, which is available to us through our agreements with Enterprise. We currently lease a number of our fleet vehicles through Enterprise. And we also utilize their eFleet service, which is one of the fleet management systems we have available to us. The other option we explored is a WEX program through the Department of Enterprise Services via a statewide master contract. So this slide highlights some of the key differences as far as the rebates, the program expiration dates, and which stations offer the incentives. So really quickly through Chevron, we have a 10-cent rebate per gallon for the first 6 months. And then after that, it'll be a 5-cent rebate per gallon forever after. This program never expires. However, the incentive is only at the Chevron stations. However, the actual fuel cards can be used at pretty much any other gas station. With the DES, Department of Enterprise Services WEX option, there is a 1.7% rebate per gallon, This contract is set to expire in 2025. However, they do have the option to extend that contract 2 more times, so it would end in 2027. And with this program, there is the flexibility to purchase fuel at pretty much 95% or so of gas stations with that incentive. All right, so one of the first things we wanted to understand was the program impacts from a financial perspective. With any lean process improvement, we first strive to find improvements that are budget neutral or that result in a cost savings. Going into this analysis, we had to make some assumptions about historical usage and needs for the future. Our assumptions were that we would use about the same amount of fuel as we did in 2023, and that moving forward, the police department would likely make the majority of their purchases at more convenient locations. To cut to the chase, the DES WEX program is estimated to cost an additional $16,900 per year for fuel. And the Chevron WEX program is estimated to cost an additional $9,400 per year for fuel. However, with our current systems and processes, we're spending about $13,000 per year in staff time on the administrative duties, primarily with reporting and data entry. All right, while stewardship is a top priority, we also recognize that there are other ways to gauge whether an improvement is worth going after or not. So this slide summarizes some of the key benefits and considerations that we discovered when we were looking into these fuel card programs. I'll go ahead and start kind of in the middle where we have benefits that are applicable to both programs. So both of these programs have really good reporting capabilities. We are really impressed with the ability to customize reports and the ease of being able to pull those reports whenever we're ready for them. Both programs also offer exceptions and alerts. So when we do have an exception, like someone's purchasing 100 gallons of fuel and that's out of the ordinary, we can get instant notifications to our mobile device or to our email or however we want to set that up. Has a lot of customization. Both programs also offer free user-friendly applications. Both offer improved invoicing processes, which allow us to actually get invoices by department. That's a huge improvement over today where we get one invoice for the city and then somebody has to take the time to figure out which departments spent, how much in fuel and then invoice the departments internally. Both of these programs also offer waived fees so that we will get the benefit of having the number of cards that we need, the number of users that we need, number of admins we need, you name it. So I'll go ahead now and jump into some of the additional benefits that the Chevron WEX program offers, which includes internal administrative capabilities. In short, we'll hardly ever have to call customer service. If someone has an issue at a station, we'll be able to help them most likely just with a phone call or a Teams message. Also with this program, it integrates with our current fleet management systems. Thus, we will have a reduced admin burden for the data entry and reporting that we're, that we're currently doing. So comparing that with the additional benefits of the DES program, this incentive is attractive because we can use it at almost any station, and it has a slightly larger incentive overall. With our estimates, though, it's probably less than $500 in incentive per year, so it's a pretty marginal difference. So each program did have some considerations as well for us. So starting with the Chevron WEX program, the incentive is only at the Chevron stations. Luckily, we do have stations available to us here in the city. And when it comes to using our existing pump station at Public Works, there is a 35-cent transaction fee that would apply. So DES WEX, in comparison, we would have to likely contact customer service much more frequently for several types of card issues. This program overall likely is to cost more. The master contract does expire in 2025, or likely it'll go into 2027. But at either rate, there's only a few years that we would likely be able to use that program. It does have a 15-cent transaction fee as well. And It does not integrate with all of our fleet management systems, which was one of the biggest issues that we had as we were looking at this improvement. As far as next steps for this process improvement, it would include submitting the credit application to actually get into the program, updating the card reader at the Public Works fuel station for compatibility. On a side note, that is actually a relatively light lift, and we're currently working with IT to analyze what that would look like and what it would take. We would also have to do training on the program for the people who would be the admins, internal customer service managers, people who are helping to make the program work, and for the employees. The cards that we would receive would be issued to the vehicles, along with having to set up the PIN numbers for each of the employees that would act as the identifier for who's actually fueling the vehicle. And if there is a budget amendment needed, we would likely just take care of that in the future. All right, so final slide here. So the staff recommendation. So after looking at all of the possibilities, we would like to move forward with the Chevron WEX program through Enterprise. The two biggest factors here, again, is around internal admin time savings. So we'll be able to do what we need a lot faster and use our time on other activities. And this option has less of a budget impact. Are there any questions?
Hi, Lori, I have a question.
Yeah.
That's very loud. Could you walk me through a little bit more detail on the admin cost here? Because to me, $13,000 for just the admin function on this seems really high. And so I'm wondering what is taking so much time under our current process?
Yes, so I have some background on that for you.
Lori, before you answer that really quick, we are at 8:10.
Oh.
We usually have a motion to extend at 8 o'clock. Do you want to just go ahead and finish up, or do you want that motion?
Let's just finish up.
Okay, go ahead, Lori. Thank you.
Yep, no worries. So in short, and this is actually a conservative estimate, believe it or not, but we have staff spending somewhere between 10 and 15 hours per month on the fuel and maintenance reporting. So in our current state, we have the ComData cards that the police department is using. And for each transaction that is made with the ComData cards, the information from those transactions is then having to be also entered into our fleet management systems. So the fleet management systems track the mileage, which helps us to be able to monitor preventative maintenance and other things needed for the vehicles. So it's essentially duplicative work because the systems do not talk. There's also additional work being done like in finance, well, specifically accounting. So when there's invoices that come because our fuel station has received a re-up, like it's been, the pump has been refueled, she has to go in there and actually pull the data to see which departments had how many transactions, how many gallons was it, and then essentially has to create an invoice internally for each of the departments. So between primarily with those two departments, it's somewhere between 10 and 15 hours per month just with data.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Lori, help me understand why the DES fuel prices are approximately 80% higher than the Chevron gas prices. Help me understand that.
Yes. So with the DES program, the way that we went about the analysis was first we did a snapshot in time. So I pulled gas prices from a number of stations here in the city, including what our bulk gas prices would have been if we had made a purchase that day on January 8th, 2024. I pulled gas prices from a Shell station, a Chevron station, an ARCO station, and then for our bulk prices. The difference between the lowest price at the cheapest gas station, and then the most expensive one was 36 cents to $1.12 more per gallon than, hold on a moment, I'm looking at my notes. Than what the bulk cost would be at the Public Works station. So I had a choice to make as far as, well, what's the best way to reconcile this range of 36 cents to $1.12? And with consulting with finance, we decided to go ahead and take the average. So the average, just knowing that in theory, police department would be able to go to any station in the city, it's somewhere around 92 cents per gallon more on average. They might choose to go to a more expensive gas station or a cheaper one. So the average is where we went.
I'm just not following that analysis because I check gas prices everywhere. I'm a little OCD with that. And I've rarely see anything more than $1 difference. I mean, I go around and tell you what the gas price are, the Chevron all the way up home and tell you what the prices are. And there's maybe a 40-cent difference between those places. So, I mean, I'm not, you guys did the numbers on January 8th. So maybe on January 8th, that's what it was. I just want what's the best use of the city's resources. And, you know, the analysis has been helpful to see that. It just doesn't make sense to me. There's that big gap in prices.
We need a Costco gas card.
I was actually thinking
Is there,
all throughout the presentation.
was there a Costco business gas program out there somewhere? Yeah, there is.
They have a 4% rebate.
Yeah.
Oh, 6% for commercial.
What do you need for that?
Costco credit card is what they use. And they get 5% back on gas up to a certain level, then nothing. It's really not worth it.
Any other discussion or questions for Lori? What's the desire of the council?
I'll move to approve the agreement with WEX fuel card program.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead.
All right, got a motion on the agreement and a second. Do we have any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, perfect. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Sadly, I'm hearing laughing and I'm like, why are they laughing?
Move to adjourn.
Right down. I'm like, oh.
All those in favor?
Wait.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, have a great week.
Get it.
Do I second my own motion?
We'll help your neighbor. Nice to agree.
I don't know if you could do a Costco.